I want to ask you specifically and go into some of the questions with Hezbollah, and let's look at their involvement. If there was an attempt on their part to gain access or the intelligence to chemical weapons, under the authorization that the President seeks, would you see them as an acceptable target for having the ability to acquire that or the attempt to acquire that?
Well, again, I don't want to get into targeting here. It's inappropriate, except to say to you, the President's...
Would that be covered under his authorization?
No, the President's authorization does not apply to Iran or Hezbollah or other entities. It's not entity-specific. It's with respect to the Assad regime's capacity with respect to chemical weapons. And it is solely focused on the degrading and the preventing of the use by the Assad regime.
So are we actively engaged to make sure that Hezbollah is not gaining access to these chemical weapons to be used in another theater?
Well, General, do you want to, I mean...
Yeah, we do know a little bit about that, whether they even want any part of chemical weapons, and if so, what might be the instrument. I can tell you our regional partners are very interested in that question, but it really would be classified. Okay.
So you're saying then if Syria transferred their chemical weapons to Iran, to a state-controlled entity, the receiving of those chemical weapons would not be one that would dictate action from us?
No, it is not. These are not externally focused at all, and I want to emphasize that. I will add that there is evidence that both Iran and Hezbollah have opposed the use of chemical weapons.
Okay, so let me go on further, because I think, Secretary Kerry, your quote is, do we mean what we say? And so I think that's a critical question today, because is this a new departure? Are we going to start a new foreign policy where we truly mean what we say? Because about 6 minutes into your testimony, you mentioned that there was 11 other events where gas or chemical weapons was used there in Syria, and yet we've done nothing. And so when we start to look at that, is this a new day for foreign policy where we're going to start to say something and mean it and draw a red line that truly is a red line?
Well, let me say with respect to those other incidents, this is an intelligence community assessment.
But this is not new intelligence.
No.
I mean, we've known this for many months.
Congressman, I know this because I've been at the forefront. I was here.
I've read your reports, yeah.
Arguing this and talking about it last year, too. The problem was, again, with many of those, the quality of the evidence, the level of the event, and people were uncomfortable with the notion that in fact, it called for action, but it didn't necessarily rise to the level of what the President has decided.
So what is that level? Is it 1,000 deaths?
No, it's not based on deaths. It's based on, I think, an exhaustion.
Because either use requires action or it doesn't.
I beg your pardon?
Either when they use...
Well, I don't know. What was the date when the President drew the red line publicly? I don't recall that.
But it had been,
I think some of those events were prior to that.
Sure.
And so I think there's been a steady
because we go back all the way to August of last year.
And I think there was a steady effort by the administration and others to try to send messages, and they were sent very powerfully, I might add. Messages were sent to the Russians. They were sent directly through to Iranians. The messages were sent.
But today we're talking about military action.
Now I think there's a sense of those efforts all having been exhausted, and this, therefore, being a remedy of last resort.
Okay. So when do we ultimately get that? When can our enemies and our allies depend on us to take action when we have these kind of things that happen? Because CIA reports...
When the House of Representatives passes the President's request for this resolution.
As it relates to Syria and everybody else. Because this is just Syria, but I'm talking about internationally.
Well, internationally, Congressman, I think we've been proving our word good on everything the President said he's going to do. He's drawing down in Iraq. He's drawing down in Afghanistan. We're working on the Middle East peace process. We've been involved with Egypt and many other countries. We're continuing to prosecute al-Qaeda in Yemen and elsewhere. We've decimated al-Qaeda in Pakistan. We're working on the bilateral security arrangement with Afghanistan. I mean, these are things that are all going on, and I think these broad, sweeping assessments don't actually do justice to what is happening.